In November 2025, the U.S. was deep into a government shutdown, with federal agencies closed and millions affected. President Trump, frustrated by the gridlock, publicly demanded Senate Republicans eliminate the legislative filibuster, a move that would let them pass a funding bill with a simple majority. This nuclear option sparked fierce debate, not just between parties, but within the GOP itself. Trump saw the filibuster as an outdated obstacle, while many senators viewed it as a vital safeguard for bipartisan cooperation. The nation watched as the Senate faced a defining test-break tradition for a quick fix, or preserve the rules that shape American democracy. The filibuster is one of the most distinctive and controversial features of the United States Senate. It allows a minority of senators to block or delay legislation simply by extending debate, sometimes indefinitely. This means that even if a bill has majority support, a determined group of senators can prevent it from coming to a final vote by refusing to yield the floor or by threatening to do so. The filibuster has a long history, dating back to the early 19th century, and has been used by both parties to advance or block key pieces of legislation. Unlike the House of Representatives, where debate is tightly controlled and time limits are strictly enforced, the Senate prides itself on being a place of open and extended debate. In the House, most bills are debated for only a few hours, and the majority party can usually push through its agenda with little resistance. But in the Senate, the filibuster gives the minority party significant power to shape, delay, or even block legislation altogether. Today, the mere threat of a filibuster is often enough to halt a bill in its tracks. To overcome a filibuster, the Senate must invoke what's called cloture, a procedure that requires the support of at least 60 senators. If 60 senators vote for cloture, debate ends, and the bill can move forward to a final vote. But if fewer than 60 senators are willing to end debate, the bill is effectively stalled, no matter how much support it has. This 60-vote threshold means that, in practice, the majority party almost always needs to work with the minority to pass most major laws. Bipartisan cooperation becomes essential, and even a small group of senators can wield enormous influence over the legislative process. This dynamic has led to both gridlock and compromise, depending on the political climate and the issues at stake. In 2025, for example, Republicans held 53 seats in the Senate. While this gave them a majority, it was still far short of the 60 votes needed to break a Democratic filibuster. As a result, even with control of the chamber, Republicans faced significant obstacles in passing their legislative priorities, unless they could persuade at least 7 Democrats to join them. Over the years, both parties have taken steps to weaken the filibuster, especially for presidential nominations. In 2013, Democrats eliminated the filibuster for most executive branch and judicial nominees, and in 2017, Republicans extended this change to Supreme Court nominations. However, the filibuster still stands as a powerful tool for blocking or shaping legislation, and any move to eliminate it entirely would mark a dramatic shift in Senate tradition. Former President Donald Trump has proposed going even further, by extending the so-called nuclear option to all legislation. This would mean ending the filibuster for bills, allowing a simple majority of 51 senators to pass any law. Supporters argue this would make the Senate more efficient and responsive to the will of the voters, while critics warn it would erode minority rights and lead to more extreme swings in policy. Such a fundamental change would reshape how Congress works, potentially making it easier for the majority party to enact its agenda, but also raising questions about the Senate's role as a check on majority power. The debate over the filibuster is likely to continue, as both parties weigh the costs and benefits of preserving or ending this unique Senate tradition. President Trump made headlines when he called for what he described as the nuclear option in the Senate, a move that would fundamentally change how laws are passed in the United States. He argued that the filibuster, a long-standing Senate rule requiring a supermajority to advance most legislation, was not only outdated, but also undemocratic. In Trump's view, this procedural hurdle allowed a small group of senators to block the will of the majority, frustrating the desires of voters who had elected him and his party to enact change. Trump blamed the filibuster for the ongoing government shutdown, pointing to empty federal buildings and stalled services as evidence of a broken system. He insisted that the gridlock in Washington was not just a political inconvenience, but a real hardship for ordinary Americans who depended on government services. He accused Democrats of weaponizing the filibuster, using it as a tool to sabotage the will of the people and block his administration's agenda at every turn. According to Trump, this was less about principle and more about partisan obstruction, with Democrats determined to deny him any legislative victories. On social media and in public statements, Trump branded the elimination of the filibuster as the ultimate trump card, a bold solution to end the crisis and restore government function. He argued that this was the only way to break the deadlock and move the country forward. Trump's push for the nuclear option put Senate Republicans in a difficult position. They faced a stark choice: uphold the Senate's traditions and risk continued gridlock, or side with Trump and their party to push through his legislative priorities. The pressure was intense, with Trump making it clear that he expected loyalty from his party in this high-stakes battle. For Trump, the issue was simple: elections have consequences. He argued that when voters choose a majority, that majority should have the power to govern without being constantly blocked by minority tactics. This message resonated with his supporters, who saw the filibuster as a tool of the political establishment to maintain the status quo. In Trump's eyes, the filibuster was a relic of a bygone era, a procedural trick that allowed Washington insiders to ignore the will of the people. He believed it slowed progress to a crawl, making it nearly impossible to deliver on the promises he had made to the American public. Ending the filibuster for Trump was about more than just passing legislation. It was about smashing what he called the swamp, the entrenched interests and old rules that he believed stood in the way of real change. He promised his supporters that he would do whatever it took to deliver on his campaign promises, even if it meant breaking with decades of Senate tradition. For Trump, abolishing the filibuster would be more than a legislative maneuver. It would be a powerful symbol of his disruption of old Washington norms, a clear message that he was willing to challenge the system to fulfill his mandate and reshape American politics. Despite Trump's push, Senate Republicans quickly and firmly rejected eliminating the filibuster. Majority Leader John Thune and Whip John Barrasso publicly reaffirmed their support for the rule, calling it a crucial safeguard. Rank-and-file Republicans echoed this, arguing the filibuster forces compromise and prevents extreme swings in policy. Senator John Curtis emphasized its role in fostering bipartisan cooperation. Senator Thom Tillis even vowed to resign if the filibuster was abolished, underscoring the depth of opposition. For many, protecting Senate traditions outweighed loyalty to any president. The message was clear: the filibuster would remain. Not all Republicans agreed. Beneath the surface of party unity, deep divisions simmered, revealing a complex web of loyalties, fears, and ambitions. As the shutdown dragged on, cracks began to show within the GOP, with lawmakers openly questioning the wisdom of their own leadership's strategy. A vocal minority, led by freshman Senator Bernie Moreno, emerged as a forceful bloc within the party. Moreno, a staunch Trump ally, took to the airwaves and Senate floor, arguing that the shutdown was not just a crisis, but an opportunity, a chance to finally end the filibuster, a Senate rule he claimed Democrats had weaponized for years to block conservative priorities. Moreno's message was clear: the time for half measures was over. Moreno and his allies insisted that the filibuster was less a tool for moderation and more a relic that allowed the minority to grind government to a halt. They painted it as a shield for obstruction, not compromise, and argued that bold action was needed to break the deadlock and deliver on promises made to voters. For years, the filibuster had been both a symbol of Senate tradition and a lightning rod for controversy. Moreno's camp saw the current crisis as the perfect storm to finally challenge its legitimacy, rallying support from conservative media and grassroots activists frustrated by legislative gridlock. Yet, not all Republicans were convinced. Some, like Senator Roger Marshall, admitted the crisis made them reconsider their long-held positions. Marshall, usually a defender of Senate norms, confessed to colleagues that the shutdown had shaken his faith in the old rules. But he and others hesitated, haunted by the specter of what Democrats might do if handed unchecked power. The risk was clear: if Republicans ended the filibuster now, it would set a precedent. The next time Democrats controlled the Senate, they could use the same power to pass sweeping progressive laws on healthcare, climate, voting rights, and more, without a single Republican vote. The fear of unleashing a legislative arms race weighed heavily on the minds of many GOP senators. This "what goes around comes around" logic became the central argument for restraint. In closed-door meetings and late-night phone calls, Republican senators debated not just the immediate crisis, but the long-term consequences for the Senate as an institution. Most ultimately decided that protecting the filibuster, however flawed, was the safer path. The shutdown tested principles, exposed rifts, and forced lawmakers to confront uncomfortable questions about power and precedent. In the end, fear of future consequences, of what might happen when the tables turned, prevailed over the urge for immediate victory. The GOP remained deeply divided, with passionate voices on both sides. But for now, the majority held the line, choosing caution over confrontation, and leaving the filibuster and the party's internal tensions intact. Defenders of the filibuster argued it's essential for moderation and stability, forcing broad consensus for major laws. The Senate, they said, is designed to cool partisan passions and take a long-term view, unlike the House. Eliminating the filibuster would turn the Senate into a second house, leading to wild policy swings and national instability. The rule protects the minority, regardless of party, and ensures laws have bipartisan support. Leaders like Thune warned it prevents really bad things from happening, like extreme partisan legislation. For institutionalists, preserving the filibuster was about protecting the Senate's unique role in American democracy. As senators argued, the shutdown's toll on Americans grew. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers were furloughed or unpaid, straining families nationwide. The crisis threatened healthcare, with expiring subsidies risking massive premium hikes for millions. Food assistance programs faced uncertainty. Military pay faced uncertainty. Air travel slowed due to staff shortages. Trump's camp blamed Democratic obstruction, arguing the filibuster prolonged suffering. Democrats countered that Republican refusal to negotiate was the real problem, proving the need for rules that force compromise. The shutdown's real-world pain fueled the urgency of the filibuster debate. For many, the stakes were more than political, they were personal. The filibuster fight was about more than one bill. It was a battle over power and the future of the Senate. Trump saw ending the filibuster as a way to deliver on his agenda and reshape Washington. For Democrats, the rule was their main leverage, letting them block GOP priorities and demand negotiation. The Senate's math made compromise essential. Republicans needed Democratic votes, and vice versa. The standoff showed why the filibuster endures. It forces coalition building, not just party line wins. The shutdown was a case study in the slow, grinding process of bipartisan negotiation. For many senators, that's exactly how the system is supposed to work. As November began, the filibuster debate was deadlocked, mirroring the shutdown itself. Trump kept pushing for its end, but Senate Republicans stood firm, valuing tradition over a quick fix. The likely outcome? A painful, negotiated compromise, not a radical rules change. The episode highlighted the tension between majority rule and minority rights at the heart of American governance. The shutdown exposed deep divisions between parties and within the GOP over how the Senate should function. The future of the filibuster and the Senate's role in a polarized era remains one of democracy's biggest unanswered questions.